What's up, Speedy's Garage gang? Welcome back to the Speedy's Garage YouTube channel. Something interesting to talk about this week, and I'm excited to get right into it with you guys. I really enjoyed the last one. I read all the comments, every single one, and I respond to a lot of them. And the last video, we had a lot of good discussion. I really had a good time with it. I appreciate all of you guys that watch and comment. I like the interactivity, I guess I'll call it. It sort of reminds me of being at a cruise-in back in the day, and we were always talking about what's the next really cool thing that Dodge might be working on, and a bunch of car guys kind of sitting around chatting about it. So thanks for everybody that left comments. I hope you do the same on this one. Let's jump straight into it. And just in case you weren't aware, there has been a customer satisfaction bulletin issued on the Demon 170 for a spark plug replacement. They'll do it at the dealership free of charge. You just have to make an appointment so they can order the proper parts. The difference is going to be a new spark plug. I do think it is still a champion plug, and it will be gapped to 0.024 inches, which is what the new spark plug designation or gap designation is for this car. I haven't done mine yet because mine never gave me any problems. I have checked a couple of my plugs and they are gapped at 0.032 right now, but since it's never had any trouble, I never really worried about it. However, I am going to get them swapped out since there is now a customer satisfaction bulletin on it. So just a heads up in case you weren't aware. So if you missed last time, I'll link it to the top, but it was a great discussion and some of my thoughts around what the V8 or the updated V8 might be looking like coming from Dodge. I think everybody can agree, in order for them to stay relevant and competitive, they're gonna have to come back with a V8. The rumors that I had heard a few years ago were that it was gonna be a twin turbo, probably a smaller displacement, twin turbo setup on it to make a decent amount of horsepower, but they were gonna do something different than the supercharger. And the Hellcat V8, which is super popular, they're 10 years old now, so they're gonna have to come out with something new. So we talked about that last time, if you wanna go back and check that out. Now let's talk about current offerings. So there's very few things on the table to get excited about. We've heard all about the EV car, not super popular. They are gonna do a straight six or inline six version that's gasoline powered with turbos on it. I think there's gonna be a 420 horsepower one and a 550 high output version, but that's still not gonna scratch the itch for muscle car enthusiasts, I don't think. And that new Charger, I'm not sold on the looks of it, but it is super big. I mean, it is huge. I've read that it is even either as long or longer than a Durango. I mean, you're talking about it being longer than a potentially 3-row SUV. They're going the wrong direction. So let's talk about what might be coming. Well, first of all, the Durango is still gonna have the Hellcat V8 in it, which is kind of weird that it's the only one. The TRX isn't gonna have it anymore. Kind of odd that the Durango is gonna keep it. It is a 10-year-old V8 at this point. And my other question is, if they're gonna keep it, why don't they put the red-eye version in the Durango and make it something new? Couple of things I can think of. One would be maybe emissions, and maybe that's the reason that they can't or aren't. And then the other could be a limitation of the amount of horsepower the all-wheel drive system can handle. Because if you remember, the TRX had the Hellcat motor in it. It's all-wheel drive. The Trackhawk had the Hellcat motor in it. It's all-wheel drive. And the Durango also had the Hellcat motor in it. Again, all-wheel drive. So maybe there's something with that transfer case that it couldn't handle the extra torque coming from the red-eye motor. But if I were in charge of things, I would be looking to put that red-eye motor in to have it be a refresh or a little bit of an update to that Durango while we bridge into something new. Now you still can get the 6.4 liter truck motor in I think it's the Ram 2500, but that's the only other V8 that they offer. Now let's talk about what could happen. And what made me start thinking about this is a interview I listened to this week, and I'm a car enthusiast. I really enjoyed the Challenger, modern Challenger platform. That got me into Dodge vehicles, but I love all kinds of performance cars. And I listened to a recent interview with Taj, no wait, that's wrong. It's Taj Yukter, I think is how you say it. But anyway, he was the chief executive engineer on Corvette and had been the chief engineer for many years. I think going back, and you guys can correct me in the comments if I got any of this wrong, I think on the C5 maybe is when he started working on it. So if you think about that, it's C5, C6, C7, and C8. And so listening to that interview, which I found fascinating because it sort of gave you kind of a peek behind the curtain of how an auto manufacturer develops a new model. And I learned a lot listening to him and his marketing VP, I think is who was with him, describe how they had to do things to get those cars to market. One of the big things that kind of was a light bulb moment for me is on the C7 Corvette, which is the previous generation. It was supposed to be a mid-engine model, and they had actually already started working on it. And stay with me here. I promise you this is going to be relevant to what I'm going to get into here in a minute. It was supposed to be a mid-engine, which means engine in the back, and they were going to do that with the C7. Well, if you remember, they didn't. When it came out, it was still a front-engine car, and the C8, which is the most modern iteration, I think it came out in 2020, was the one that got the mid-engine. Well, Taj went into the reason why. They were already way down the road of development on that mid-engine C7 version of the car, and the bankruptcy and all that happened in 2008, 2009. That's when GM went bankrupt, and there was all the, remember the economy crash in the United States, a lot of stuff going on there. And he got a call, he said, on Christmas Eve, and they had canceled the program. He's like, wait a minute, we're so far down the road canceling the program, and they're like, we don't have the money. Like, we don't even know if we're gonna have jobs. And so literally the Corvette team were talking about if GM went under, they had the know-how and the engineers, they were gonna put some money together and try to get investors. They were gonna start their own car company making the Corvette. I mean, it's pretty interesting interview. You should Google it. And he's now retired, Taj is. So if you like engineering and the behind the scenes stuff, I definitely recommend you give it a listen. So now let's get into why that's relevant. And it's because he tabled all of that design work that they had done on that mid-engine car. And then when it came time to do the C8, they pulled that back off the shelf, and it gave them a leap forward in development of the mid-engine car. So let's talk about what might be happening at Dodge and why that's relevant. In 2021 in July, we saw Tim do a commercial, and he lifts the front, and I'll show you this here. He lifts the black car cover off of a car they had not announced yet.
We're on location at the historic Dodge family home with over 100 years of amazing Dodge heritage parked behind me. And today is an important milestone, embracing the brand's history while looking to the future.
It had air vents on it. You can see them clearly. An electric car does not need air vents, so keep that in mind. He was already talking about the EV, and everything in that content led us to believe there was some other car they were also working on in conjunction with the EV. Now remember, this is almost 4 years ago now. This is in July of 2021. So what if that car, and we had heard rumors that they had started to either put trademarks or some other paperwork around the name Barracuda. Now I get it, some purists are going to be upset about that name because it was technically a Plymouth moniker, but who really cares? It's still a cool name, and if that came back to Dodge as a Dodge Barracuda, that would be pretty cool, and you could have that be maybe, well, we'll get into that in a minute. We'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, we know they were working on something. What if it was the Barracuda? Had it under that cover, how far along in development were they? And would they be able to take some of that work that had been shelved 4 years ago, pick it right back up? They got the new V8, hopefully, that they're working on, twin turbo. Now they might have this, this Barracuda, I'm gonna call it just for sake of this video, 80% size, so 20% smaller than the Hellcat platform was. If you shave that down and you make it 8/10 instead of 10/10, you make it a little bit smaller, that's gonna automatically mean lighter. If they get clever with materials, they can lighten it still. They've got the twin turbo V8 that we talked about last time, putting out you don't have to make as much horsepower if the car's lighter, right? 700-ish horsepower. I think they should definitely keep the quad headlights because that's sort of a signature look and kind of, I think, goes with that muscle car theme, those quad headlights, but round the corners of the car a little bit, maybe give it some hips in the back for a wider tire. And now you've got the Charger, which could be the electric model for people that want EVs and have something for that market. And now you've got the Barracuda, which is your gasoline-powered option with your performance division. Now, they don't have SRT anymore. They have to figure that out. Funding's probably going to be a question. We'll get into that in a minute. And then you could potentially do it all-wheel drive like a lot of us talked about in the comments last time. And some of you pointed out, well, if you add all-wheel drive, it's going to be heavy. Well, Porsche cars in a lot of cases are all-wheel drive. Metrics that I found on the 911 Turbo, for example, they're 3,800 pounds and they're all-wheel drive. So I get it, a little bit different, car there, but just because it's all-wheel drive doesn't mean it has to be heavy. So that could be an option. Doesn't have to be a standard option. It could be an option that you could select in order to keep, costs down. You could do an RT style and say it gets the 420 horsepower inline six engine. Then you could do a Scat Pack style. The reason I'm saying styles because I don't know if they'll use those names again. RT probably, Scat Pack I don't know. But say they did a Scat Pack style and they did the high output inline six. Now you're at 550. And then they could actually use the name CUDA, which would be their performance high-end halo car. And it could be 700 or 800 V8 twin turbo horsepower and make it all-wheel drive. That would be pretty slick. Definitely keep the quad headlights, like I said, and maybe in the back they could do something modern, like a modernized version of those CUDA taillights that were the two strips, and maybe a box around them to sort of give it a little bit of a modern twist with some LEDs. Interior definitely needs an upgrade. The Hellcats over the years and the Challengers and Chargers even, RT, Scat Pack, doesn't really matter. They got incremental changes, but it needs an overhaul. That interior, again, is 10 years old. Seeing some of the interior of the electric or the EV car looks pretty good. I mean, as long as they keep the material content at a high quality level, some, contrast stitching, seats a little bit lighter, a little bit smaller maybe. A rear seat delete option, I think, if you wanted to go lightweight would be great. The Mustang screens, they need to be careful. If you look at the new Mustang, the screens are awful. It looks like somebody took a short and wide flat screen TV and just glued it to the dash. I think the reason a lot of car companies have gone to that is they're trying to be modern, but there's also a cost savings that goes with that. You don't have individual gauges and buttons that you have to pay for and produce. You just have one screen that you pay for and then a bunch of software behind it that controls everything. I personally hate that. I want buttons. I don't have to go through a bunch of menus because I want to turn on the heated seat. Now I got to go through 4 menus on a screen to turn the heated seat on. I don't want anything to do with that. I want at least a speedometer and a tach that are real gauges. Now they could have a screen in between to give me some vehicle dynamics or information would be great. I think a 8 or so inch screen off to the side is also a good idea for, performance gauges and things like that and other things, navigation. Maybe a 8-inch screen is probably plenty big. 10-inch tops for me personally. Let me know what you guys think. But I think those would be some really nice options. So here's where the challenges are going to come in. They've shelved probably those design elements or that car they were working on. It's been sitting on the shelf for 4 years. SRT has been disbanded, like I mentioned. Some of them have even left the company. Money, that's going to be the big one. Since, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, they've sort of been gutted, for lack of a better term. There's nothing really bread and butter that they have. They sort of put all their chips in the same basket with the EV being the big seller, and it's not going to be. The trucks no longer have a V8 except the one I mentioned, which is the 2500. And I don't think the inline six is going to do well in the truck either. So they're going to have to quickly bring something back. Easiest thing to do would be to start putting the 6.4 in the 1500. I mean, that would turn things around pretty quickly, start building up some income on sales. Now you've got some money to play with and you can get into some R&D and start finishing this car that I'm going to call the 2027 Barracuda. And the reason I'm saying 2027 is that gives them 2 years. They get the engine developed, start getting it in the chassis, get all of the safety and wiring and fueling and all those things that they need to do, the packaging to get it to fit in the car, figure out what the materials are going to be. It's going to have to be lighter. Shooting for the sky goal would be 3,900 pounds or less. All-wheel drive on their Halo model. And again, have some lower models like your Scat Pack or your RT with different horsepower designations to bring people to the table that can't buy or don't want to buy the Halo car and spend, bigger bucks for it. That's going to bring up another thing. They're going to have to get the cost down. They're going to have to get it down where the entry-level car, the RT, is affordable. We're seeing with the Mustang right now, they sort of price themselves out. Things have gotten too high and people aren't going to go buy these cars and want to have a $1,400 or $1,500 monthly car note on these vehicles. They're going to have to bring those costs down somehow and get something. Maybe there's some economy of scale they can do with the RT and sell a bunch of those at a lower price. Maybe give it some options, like you'd have a cloth interior if you want to really just get the base model, and then some options for leather and things like that don't get too crazy. So the engineering team from a performance perspective has got to get figured out. The money's got to get figured out. The third thing I think is a big hurdle. Where would they be built? where would they build these cars if they brought them back? The plant in Canada shut down and is getting retooled, so it's out. I don't know exactly what plants are functioning today that could develop and build a car like that. Leave me some comments again if you have that kind of information and follow that, so I can kind of get an idea. I'd love to hear from you. The price points, I think I talked about that already. You need to be 35, 40K for the RT probably. And that's nicely optioned. Maybe 45 to 50K for the Scat Pack. And if they could get around 70 to 75K for the Halo, I think they would have a winner. And of course, if you check all-wheel drive and every option under the sun, it might go a little higher than that. But at least the entry level on those cars, I think those prices would make the most sense. And I really do enjoy the conversation. So please leave me some comments below and let me know what you think and what you would like to see. And there's another big reason I'm going to say that is not only do I read the comments and respond to them and enjoy the conversation, but I know for a fact people at Dodge, they watch this channel. I know that for a fact. I've been told that by the people that watch it. So I want to make that clear. And I ran Challenger Fest for several years. If you haven't been following along, it was a drag race and car show event for the modern Gen 3 Hemi cars. We had it at Beach Bend in Bowling Green, Kentucky every year, had it once a year. And I heard through the grapevine that the engineers were actually showing up to the event as spectators, and they were walking around and sort of seeing what the enthusiasts were doing. They like to see what we were doing with their product after the fact. And for example, I was seeing our racers cut holes in the headlight for the intake before we ever saw it on one of the Dodge production cars. And I heard they had walked around and seen us doing that or seen people doing that, and they made notes, these engineers that had come to Challenger Fest. I tried to find out who they were, and I would love to have chatted with them and kept it on the lowdown. That's the other thing I will say is when I get information, it's not like, hey, here's the exact car we're building. Here's the options you're going to be able to get. Here's the horsepower it's going to make. Here's the weight and size and capabilities of the car. Signed, Joe Smith, Dodge engineer. That is not how it happens. The way I end up getting some of my information is it's usually an obscure comment or email or a message through one of the social media outlets that I'm a part of where it's, you're getting warmer. I'll make a video and it won't reference the video or anything. I'll just say you're getting warmer and it's some account that, doesn't really tie back to anything. Or I'll get an email. Hey, you might want to think about this. It's never a defined, here's what's going to happen. Here's information you can share or not share. It's just a real vague hint. And it could not even be real. It could be from just another enthusiast, but the way they come across, I don't think they are. If you look back at some other content that I made, it ends up being pretty accurate by the time the car actually comes out. Like some of the stuff that was happening with like the Red Eye and the Demon 170, I was a little shocked it was called a Demon 170, but the other details I had heard through the grapevine like that and was able to get some of them pretty close. And I use my own experience, so I take the little hint that they give me, do my own research, and use my own experience to come up with what I think might be possible. So that's sort of how it happens when I come up with some of this stuff and using common sense. So having said that we do know Dodge watches this channel and they are very interested in what the enthusiasts do with their products, I'm going to encourage you to leave comments, tell them what you want to see. I mean, can you imagine they pull up YouTube videos, and I was told they watch these at Dodge, like literally at their meetings and stuff. They watch enthusiast videos like these to get ideas and understand what the community's looking at, the enthusiasts are looking for. So leave comments below on what you would like to see on this new car that comes out. Let's hope it's going to have a V8. It's going to almost have to, or they're not going to survive long term because Chevy and Ford are still producing V8s. So Dodge has got to get back in the ring with that. I think with some of the leadership changes and some other things taking place at Stellantis, I think we're going to have the opportunity to do that. Leave comments. Let them know what you would like to see in this new model. And the reason they're not going to just come right out and give me direct, here's what we're going to do information is because I'm going to go back to that interview with that executive engineer from Corvette. He said they were already working on a mid-engine C7. Like they were already making mules, I believe, if I remember correctly from the interview. They were driving around trying to figure out how everything was going to work. And then they were told just all of a sudden that car was getting canceled. He said if he had been interviewed and they could talk about future product, he would have said the next Corvette's going to be mid-engine. And then what happened when it wasn't, right? So that's why you're never really going to be able to get a car designer or engineer really talking too much about future development and future product. Number one, they don't want something like that to happen. But number two, they try to keep all that under wraps because they don't want their competition to get it and figure out a way to do it before they can. So we're not going to get a ton of like direct, here's what's exactly going to happen information from them, but we can use our experience and our research to go back and try to put the pieces together, which is exactly what I've done here. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. That helps them get way more out into the YouTube algorithm and more people get involved and more people come into the conversation. Be sure to check us out on Instagram. It's @Speedies_garage, as well as the website, www.speediesgarage.net. And hopefully I'll see you out there.